Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Lineup with Dave Proden. I'm Dave Proden, and this is episode 15. We've talked a little bit about this before, but for those who don't know, I got my start in surfing as a surf shop kid, working at the Rip Curl Surf Center in San Clemente from 1999 to 2006, off and on through high school, college, and a little bit after college. Discounting odd jobs growing up for cash, the Rip Curl Surf Center was my second real job after working at a Lord of the Flies style juice stop ran by a senior at my high school, which is a story for another time. An institution in and of itself for anyone who's ever surfed trestles. I walked into Rip Curl one day after a post-surf feed at Carl's Jr., asked for an application, and then manager Isaac Kirkpatrick, originally from Kauai, hired me on the spot to oversee shipping and receiving. Right place, right time, I guess. Now, this was before the rebuild of the shiny present store back when the shop was still a repurposed 1970s style restaurant. I oversaw the stockroom, which was essentially a rabbit warren of closet space, with a door to the outside where shipments would get dropped off and another door to the shop floor. My job was to receive shipments from the outside door, check the product against the invoice order, price tag, security tag, then take it through the inside door and place it on the floor for sale. To this day, people tell me what a shitty job it was, but I always thought the opposite. I still do think the opposite. I loved it because the Rip Curl Surf Center then, as it is now, was a sacred temple of surfing. And this job got me in there. I'm still super proud of it, and working there undoubtedly shaped the way I view surfing and employment and life. All right, episode 15. So we've talked a little bit about this before through the other podcasts, but it's taken some concentrated introspection on my behalf to make sense of the, now almost 15 years at the ASP WSL, and I guess a couple of years freelancing for Surfing Magazine, RIP, and 7-ish years at Rip Curl. It's been a lot of fun. It's been harder work than a lot of folks realize, and it's also been a little blurry, but the best I can sum it up for a kid from the burbs who grew up playing stick and ball sports, getting into surfing and trying to find employment, gainful or otherwise, it's pretty much like running away to join the circus. Most other people I talk to in surfing have similar experiences. It was different and exciting and fun, and it still is. And like everything different and exciting and fun, it becomes easy to say yes to everything. Yes to extra hours, yes to another assignment, yes to another trip. And when you blur your personal and professional lives, they can either harmonize nicely or they can cannibalize one another like a nightmarish Ouroboros. And like anything exotic and special in nature, where there's beauty, there's also risk. The surfing world throughout the ages has often danced on this knife's edge of exposing people to some of the best and most profound experiences of their lives, while also opening doors to some of the worst. Now, that's not to say that everyone isn't, at the end of the day, ultimately responsible for themselves. But if you want to leave the safety of the shore for unknown waters, you have to accept that what you may find may be good, bad, ugly, maybe all three. And not everyone comes back. And those who do are rarely comfortable being candid about their experience. Today's conversation is different. Our guest today got his own start in the surfing world at TK's infamous Frog House in Newport Beach. He went from Volcom-sponsored Shop Grom to Southern California point of contact for the Irons Brothers and other Hawaii transplants. He traveled the world as the SMP surf team manager, broke new ground in the film arena with the culture-shifting Snapt 1 and Snapt 2 movies, before parlaying his experience into developing the RVCA surf program with Pat Tenore and Conan Hayes. He managed rapper Mickey Avalon, where, as he puts it, he turned into a vampire and an opiate addict, trying and failing to get clean several times before he found sobriety through a reconnection to surfing. And he still rips river jetties on a regular basis, and he'll be dropping the 4th installment of the Snapt franchise later this year. Please enjoy the Lineup's conversation with Logan Dulien.
The good old clap, take one.
That's right.
How many of you knew what you wanted to be when you were 7 years old? I did. I wanted to be a world champion.
Hey, is there honesty involved in this podcast? Can we be honest?
You can shut your fucking lips.
And then I'll just say, put them up, what? Let's go.
He's like, you look too pretty on the wave. Get ugly.
We can talk about DMT if you want.
I thought you were boxing.
Logan Dulien, you're a former Volcom surfer, Newport Beach royalty surf shop from your Frog House days, filmer producer of Snapt 1 and 2, marketing manager for Ruka, manager for Mickey Avalon, substance abuser, recoverer, manager for Asher Pacey, husband, father, resurrector of the Snap franchise with Snap 3 and now Snap 4, and close friend of the Irons family, and you still manage to shred river jetties on the regular. Let's start with how you see your current role in the surfing world.
It's a good question off the bat. I don't know. I just think I'm just a surf junkie as far as I just live for it. I love it. And I feel like surf content right now is in a crazy place with social media and Instagram and all that stuff. And I feel like whether it's on social media or whether it's in a movie, like surf content kind of lives forever. And I just feel like it's such an important part, like from the endless summers to, anything to today. I feel like it basically is what everyone views surfing as is by what content they're watching. And so for me, I feel like it's been a big deal to try to get my hands on the best footage possible with the guys that I'm really impressed with their surfing, and try to obviously put it on a platform that people will be stoked on, with the main objective of getting people excited to surf. That's, for me, like how it all started is like Taylor Steele movies or Lost movies. Those things just got you pumped to surf. It wasn't about like waterfalls and flowers and filter clips. It was just about surf to good music, and that was it. Didn't matter what camera it was, just mattered about the clips. And
it's always been one of the really few platforms for like performance measurement in the surfing world. You referenced, Endless Summer 2 and 5 Summer Stories and the Taylor Steeles and the Lost films, to like kind of the big budget, like, trilogies or 3 Degrees or Scratching the Surface, to now like the web clips. And in addition to kind of contests, like the video photo editorial is kind of the other barometer for performance measurement.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. It's crazy. So there's such a wide spectrum. So I think it's all kind of what you're going after. And I think right now it's really hard to get clips and keep them off the gram or keep them off the internet before the night of the premiere.
Sure.
And that's kind of right now my main objective, is to have kids and surfers just excited for watching this for the first time ever on the big screen. Kind of like how we used to, like when we knew they were filming for, let's say, Momentum 2 or Focus or any of those movies, like you would count down the days until the premiere came to your town.
Sure.
And you'd froth for it. And I think it brings that excitement and that X factor that I think has been lost, with obviously the dominance of something like Instagram or all these web clips coming out.
Yeah. Do you think it's getting easier though? Because I would say that it's almost like a pendulum where like a few years ago, like no one could resist. Like I caught this wave, I did this thing, it's going up on the gram in 18 seconds because I need to get that endorphin hit of like likes or attention. To now people kind of being a little more, it seems like people are more open to being restrained of like, look, I'm exhausted on the social media treadmill of having to produce daily, if not hourly content. I'm going to hold and create something substantive. Have you found that to be the case with the kids you work with?
I think right now, I think right now they're just starting to get that, or maybe in the last year, I think people are realizing like, whoa, I'm better off saving this clip, whether putting it in an edit that's dropped at a later point or putting it in a movie. It's going to have a longer impact.
Sure.
Than just whacking it up on Instagram. Because that's the problem right now with Instagram. And I love Instagram, but the problem is that it's here today and it's gone in an hour.
Yeah.
And it could be a nuts clip. So, I think kids are definitely catching on. Guys are catching on that it's going to be a win-win for them to hold on to it and use it at the right time.
I mean, it's one of those things that I think because of the information age and the changing media landscape kind of got lost for a little bit. But, you're creating a franchise in Snapt where careers can get built just on their inclusion. Like if you think of something like the Taylor Steele videos, like the Momentum generation did a lot of things, but a huge part of their value to the community or the surfing world or their sponsors was they were part of the Momentum generation, you know? And I think there was a few years kind of, man, I know there were the campaigns and then we had like Stranger Than Fiction. So Taylor kept producing, but like kind of that core element of like, I was in, Momentum or Hit and Run. I had a segment in that. Kind of went away for a bit, but it feels like it's come back with profile-based segments in Snap.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big compliment just to be in the same sentence with that stuff and the comparison. But I mean, I think
when Taylor comes on, I'm going to say he's in the same class as Logan Dulien. He'll say the same thing.
Come on now. No, so, I mean, I think, for instance, like a perfect example is like Asher Pacey.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was the coolest thing about having him in Snap 1.
Right.
Is like people had obviously heard about Mick Fanning or Joel Parkinson or Andy or Bruce or the Hobgoods. But it was throwing someone in like Asher with those guys and knowing that, you know, this guy's going to definitely catch some eyeballs and people are going to take notice to him. And I felt like it was really cool. And then even in Snap 3 with Sheldon, Shine, you know, Mason had hit me up. He's like, hey, we got to get Sheldon in this movie. He's gnarly and this and that. And I think, you know, obviously things have panned out really good for him since the movie. And it's not just because the movie, but I think it was a good platform for him to be in the movie with these other guys that obviously were well established. It's
part of it. And one of the people I omitted in the previous comment was Kai Neville. You know, he held the torch for a while. But really right now, is there anyone else in the surfing space creating that platform in a video sense for these surfers to kind of produce and then, and as you said, have it be a part of their value to the community? Do you look at yourself as competing with anyone else right now?
I feel like I'm competing with myself.
Sure.
I mean, in a sense of, I think everyone's doing their own thing. And like the more people that put out surf movies, the more I'm stoked because this kid, Magnum Martinez, I think his name is.
Yep.
He did a movie with a bunch of his friends that was really cool. And I thought that was rad.
Magnum, I think he's from Venezuela maybe, or?
No, not Magnum Martinez.
Oh, okay.
No, it's I forget the name, but it was a really good movie. It'll come to me later.
Yeah.
But he's a young kid, and he made a movie with a bunch of his friends, and it kind of reminded me of back in the day of kind of maybe how like Taylor wanted to do it with his buddies or how I wanted to do it with my friends, guys my age.
Yeah.
And but right now, I mean, I think guys are generally kind of burned out. I think social media and everything's come about to the point where it's made it really tough for people to do this because you're competing against, basically it's a content frenzy is what I call it. Like the sponsors want their guys' stuff.
Yep.
The channels want their stuff. These guys want to put their stuff on their own social media, which is their own platform. So it's really like hard right now to basically get these guys to commit to working with you or getting you their best stuff or close to their best stuff. And at the same time, keeping their sponsors happy and keeping their channel, you know, pumping with content and whatnot. So I think we're just in an interesting time right now.
You mentioned the purpose of the Snap films is just to get people amped to go surfing. But in addition to that, you really are capturing kind of a movement of the moment. And because this is your property and because you were the founder, you're the creator, you remain kind of the gatekeeper in a lot of ways for people getting there. Do you see yourself as kind of having to adjudicate on like, okay, like this kid gets a shot, you know, we don't have space for that kid right now. Does that ever come up?
Yeah, it's especially with the new format that we came up with like the 40K thing.
Right.
And
can you explain that just for your listeners?
Yeah, basically, and this is because of the content frenzy. I was ready to throw in the towel. I was going to change my mind and just say I'm not going to do Snap 4.
Right.
We did a trip to Mexico this summer with Asher Pacey, Parker Coffin, Jack Robinson, and Jack got heat stroke, was basically in the hospital, was sick almost the whole trip. And, you know, between the filmer and everything else, it was like coming home with nothing compared to what we could have, right?
But little butterfly effect, that's probably why he qualified for the tour.
Could have been. We'll see. But, we saw what happened. So, but basically I came home and I was talking with Jack actually, and Joe Alani was there from Alani Media, and I was like, dude, you know, I can't do it. It's a frenzy. Yeah. Like I know,
it's exhausting.
For instance, Volcom wants your stuff. I know Stab wants your stuff. Every channel wants your stuff, and I just don't think I have it in me to battle with everyone.
Yeah,
it's a lot, you know. And then I was like later that, and then Jack said to me, he's like, no, you're not like for sure about this. I was like, no, I'm pretty sure, you know. And I was kind of tripping on him that he was not calling me out, but you could tell he was kind of getting me to second guess my decision, you know. And Jack's pretty quiet.
He is.
So for him to say that, it kind of threw me off. It almost was like me telling him, hey, you're not going to give up on the queue because things aren't, you know, easy. And so later that night, I was thinking, how could I still make this work? And I thought, well, a movie probably costs, I don't know, let's say 80 to 100 grand to make a surf movie, to make a good surf movie, where you're working with 15 guys, they're filmers, the whole nine. And I thought, well, you know what? Why don't we kind of go back to the intersection thing that Taylor did?
Yep.
And we could take half of that 80, let's say 40. And 40 made sense because of 40K. I mean, because of Snap 4.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm like, why don't we just put 40K in a pot? Let these guys all make their own section, because most of them have their own filmer and whatnot. And let these guys go hard. No clips that are in the movie can be seen in the internet or Instagram.
Good.
And we set all the bullet points up, and then I presented it to Mason.
Right.
Mason loved it. Obviously, I think who doesn't want a shot at, obviously making a part, but at the same time, the chance of winning 40K, that's a bigger purse, I think, than the US Open.
Sure.
So that was how we came up with it. And then I ran it by Jack, and he was in.
Mm-hmm.
And then I ran it by Seth, and he was in. So at that point, I thought, okay, you got Mason, Jack, and Seth.
It's a little bit of a fire sale, because then everyone's like, well, I want him.
That alone right there is enough guys to be like, are you really going to walk away from working with Mason, Jack, and Seth? Like, it's,
Well, I think the other, I think this is something that unfortunately not everyone realizes in the moment, but probably looking back on it, I'm sure the Momentum guys in the moment are like, oh, whatever, I'm making a video with Taylor. It's not until, in some cases, years later that they look back and like, that was important to be a part of. I think Snapt has that built-in brand already and legacy that someone like a Jack Robinson, and I'm speculating here, is probably like, well, no, this is like Andy and Bruce had like the end segments in this film. I want that in a lot of ways. Going back to the 80 to 100K traditionally to make a film, can you break down like what that entails? Like, where does that money go when you make a film like this?
Well, I mean, I think obviously the main cost is travel, right?
So do you pay for the guys to travel for the film?
It all depended. Like, everything was different. Like, okay, here's a perfect scenario, right? With Snap 3, we sent Asher Pacey and Bobby Martinez down the coast in Australia for 2 days. I paid the filmer $200 a day. They went for 2 days. So the whole trip cost me $400. They came back with the cover of Surfer and endless hours of what Bobby was claiming was the 2 best days of surfing in his whole life. And that's all the stuff with them on these lefts in Snap 3.
Yeah.
So that trip alone costed $400. So you can roll the dice so many ways. And there's other trips like the one I'm talking about that we did to Mexico this year. I mean, we brought Minnie Blanchard with us.
Yep.
And, after all the costs and everything, I mean, it was more than 10 times what the trip was with Asher and Bobby.
Right.
So I think it all varies.
So with a trip like Asher and Bobby, just so I'm clear, maybe the listeners are interested too, like they were using the ski, they had all their own boards, they're probably eating meat pies and drinking beers. That's all on the surfer. The surfer's picking up that. You're paying for the filmer.
Yeah, they hijack Kersey ski.
Okay, let's say.
They hijack Kersey ski.
Yeah, by hook or by crook, whatever works.
They went down the coast and they just hit the jackpot. It was going loony, and that was it. And it's one thing with Asher, but Bobby right now, just because he's such a hands-on dad and whatnot, to get Bobby down the coast and to score like that, and then for Bobby to come home too with the cover and all this footage, like it felt really good.
But as you said, it kind of averages out at the end.
Totally.
Where you're like, look, some things like you don't spend a lot, you get a lot in return. Sometimes you roll the dice and miss.
Totally.
And then in terms of that 80 to 100K going into like marketing or premieres, like does any of it kind of factor into that? Or are you leaning on like media and brand partners to support?
I mean, I would say the biggest portion for sure is the filmers.
Yep.
And then the travel. That alone right there is a lot. Because let's say a filmer's charging $500 a day, and you send them for a 10-day trip. That could be up to $3,000 to $5,000 just right there.
Yeah.
That's before his travel.
Yeah.
So
you're getting there, like the winds have changed. You're following the guy on Instagram stories. They're hammering beers. You're like, what happened?
Or, someone else ends up showing up, and then next thing you know, you deal with that whole scenario. It's all a roll of the dice.
I was going to say in the modern media age, is the biggest risk to making a film the potential of getting poached just because there's like other people that are there?
For sure. And I mean, and two, this is kind of a good story, and I'm guilty of that in one sense, but in Snap 1, Taylor Steele, these guys were filming, it's No Can Do's, and it's going off, and Bruce is just going loony out there. And there was this guy that was poaching them in a small little dinghy that was from Costa Rica. Well, this is a couple months after the trip. I'm in a restaurant, Wishbone, and I'm with Ozzy Wright. And Ozzy was on that trip. He was out there. And this guy walks up to us and he says, Ozzy Wright? And he says, yeah. He says, I have the most amazing footage of you at No Can Do's. And I look at him and I'm like, you have what? And then I'm like, do you have footage of Bruce too? And he's like, I got it all. And so in the clips, you can see Taylor's filmer in the clips. And this guy's like further inside of them. So he's getting like kind of longer rides. He's getting more of the inside ball and all that stuff. And it was a huge come up. I mean, I felt bad too because it wasn't my trip.
Sure.
But back then, like I'm not a threat to Taylor Steele.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And Bruce is someone I grew up with. So I figured like, I'm using this footage.
And how long ago Snapt one? We're talking 20.
Well, we started making it 20 years ago from right now. It came out 19 years ago.
Right. And so the technological evolution in terms of being able to grab stuff right away, it's like, it's insane that happened 20 years ago.
Yeah, and that was another one. That footage cost me like $100.
Well, we've kind of established the gatekeeper role you have to play. And, if that's the case, like, can you and I, like, kind of check our biases a little bit in pursuit of like ongoing refinement? Because you and I aren't that far apart in age. You're 40, I'm 36. We both grew up mostly in Orange County. We're white, we're relatively well-traveled. And I'd go as far to say we're pretty open-minded guys, but would you say that you have to work a little bit harder because of where you came from to keep an open mind and to give people chances? Because I know I do. You have all these benefits of growing up in a nice place like Orange County, but at the same time, it is a bubble. Like they call it a bubble.
For sure. I think growing up there too, one thing that I noticed from the bat is I was always intrigued and always like, I wouldn't say felt more comfortable, but I really enjoyed when all the guys would come into town from Florida or from Hawaii or from Australia. So I feel like I started thinking
more globally
earlier age, and not because I was like, oh, I want to make surf movies when I'm older, be in the surf industry. I just think it was intriguing to me.
Yeah.
I thought the way that a lot of people were thinking in Orange County was kind of, I wouldn't say narrow-minded, but it was like kind of boring.
It's super homogenized, right? Yeah. Like it's affluent, mostly white, like mostly conservative, or it was when we were growing up. Right. And this came up on the Ashton conversation too. And it's come up a lot in these podcasts, which is the idea of like surfing being a window to a more expanded perspective, whether it's different people or communities or culture, as opposed to like more insular.
For sure.
Yeah.
I listened to that. I listened to the podcast with Ashton. It was awesome.
Thank you.
And I think you guys are spot on. It's like, it's almost its own way of you tap into something completely different that's out there from anything else.
And you mentioned Asher and you mentioned Sheldy and Sheldy.
We call him Shelly Slater.
I better not.
We call him Shelly Slater.
But you've done observedly like a really nice job of unearthing and supporting lesser known talents from around the world. In addition to those two, like underground Californians like Jeff Brock, Balinese surfer like Batet Merta. Moving forward, is there a role to profile women in the Snapt films? Carissa's taking a year off of competition. Coco Ho's probably more available. Even surfers on tour like Steph and Tyler. I wonder if it's ever come up.
Yeah, it's funny because I was thinking about it, and this is just to be totally transparent, but I was thinking about, because we're going to drop Snap 1 and 2 for the first time online soon. And I was thinking about, there's like a clip in there of John Robertson, and he's wearing a shirt that says "Chick Surfers Suck." And I was thinking like how cool it is, how much things have changed.
Sure. And
how hard chicks are ripping these days. And then it kind of thought like, almost be cool to do like a Snap type of movie with that type of platform with women surfers, I think, and then I even told Mason, I'm like, you should drop a wave of Coco in your part. Because in his part in Snap 3, he had a wave of his dad and his uncle in his section with him.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting. Like, this is for the record, this is my personal opinion. It's not been adopted formally by my employers. But I do think, it comes up a lot. And I do think there's a need to kind of rethink a lot of things in surfing. High performance women surfing, in my opinion, is kind of in there. Just because it's a different creature to high performance men's surfing. And let me stress that my position on different is not better or worse. Yeah. It's just different. And what women offer is something, entirely unique and special to what men offer surfing. And I think that conflating those two things, even though sometimes that conflation is good because it elevates like quality of waves or pay equity, it kind of lost sight of what makes things special. Like I remember, I think it was Margot Oberg or Lynn Boyer from 5 Summer Stories breaking down like the difference between men's and women's surfing. And I'm going to screw this up so everyone can call me out on it. But it was something like, men are much more aggressive and women are much more stylish. But she said it so much better than I just did. But I was like 12 or like 15 when I saw that. And I was like, both those things are equally important, And I think sometimes we sit there and we try to compare apples to apples, and it's wrong in a lot of ways. So, I mean, it would be interesting to create a Snapt women's film. I think it'd also be interesting just to try to elevate someone like a Carissa in a like Snapt 5 or something, just to be like, hey, like we're not saying we're comparing her surfing to Jack Robinson's. Yeah. These are just like that's her voice and that's his voice.
No, and collaborations are great. You know, I mean, I think that's what the future brings. And as far as analytics and sponsor money, stuff like that, I think you're going to do even better with the women. It's crazy. I mean, you look online and stuff, you just see it. Like the numbers don't lie. You know, you look how many followers, you know, some of the best female surfers have, and you compare them. It's like they got a huge fan base.
They do, and it kind of goes back to like the platform conversation of like there's surf competitions and then there's content. I mean, they're kind of the same. I mean, they overlap obviously, but like that's kind of it. And I do think that there's in both senses at least a minimal disconnect between the people that really like following women surfing just for this conversation and kind of the products that are available. Yeah, you know, in terms of platform.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's the rapid progression to a women's surfing is just unreal.
That's crazy.
It's mind blowing that they're surfing so good, fast, strong, you know, progressive, and I think it's just going to get heavier and heavier. It's gnarly.
Let's roll back the tape a little bit. Newport Beach, born and raised.
Newport Beach, born and raised.
Hoag Hospital.
Hoag Hospital.
Me too.
1979.
83.
Really? You were born at Hoag?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, man.
After all these years, you're coming clean, huh?
That's right.
It's not something you brag about, huh? Born and raised, grown up in Newport.
Depends on where you're from. We can get into that. What was your family like growing up?
Well, see, I don't think like my dad is a pretty successful guy and a really good guy. And my mom was like a really, really radical alcoholic and drug addict. And basically, I think in the 80s, dads didn't get custody of their kids unless it was a severe situation.
Right.
And on a side note, too, is like I have 4 sisters and 1 brother. We have a big family.
Where do you fit in the...
I'm in the middle.
Okay.
And it's definitely like, you know, Brady Bunch of 6. This is definitely like a very twisted, dysfunctional version of the Brady Bunch. But in the 80s, like I said, dads didn't get custody of their kids unless it was a severe situation. And my mom at that point had 3 DUIs, 2 of them with us in the car, and then 2 child abuse cases. And this is kind of a heavy fact, is like my mom was arrested twice by the DARE officer at elementary school. You remember DARE?
No. Oh, the DARE.
Yeah,
yep, got it,
yeah. She, you know, the police officer would come to the school and talk to kids about not doing drugs.
Right.
But at the same time, when she came to the school, the word had got out about my mom.
Right.
And then from there, it started an investigation. So after she got arrested twice by the DARE officer, that basically gave the green light that my dad was going to get custody of us.
Right.
And then at that point, a divorce went down and kind of moved from like a nicer part of Newport. All Newport's nice, for the record. It's
within a range.
There's no hood. There's no ghetto there, obviously. But we moved from one part down to, it was like pretty nice, like 5-bedroom or something house, to there's like 7 of us total, and we moved to a 2-bedroom. That was right by the trailer park in the river jetties.
Yep.
Right by the Frog House.
Yeah.
There's those trailer parks right at the end, right before you go to Huntington, the bridge right there. So you're probably thinking like, oh, that's, you know, sucks. You go from a 5-bedroom to a 2-bedroom, and you got a pretty big family. It's getting divorced. But for me, this was like where this was the best like kind of direction change in my life, as far as this is when I was introduced to surfing.
How old are you at this point?
13.
Yep.
So basically at that point, like, it was rough for my brothers and sisters because they didn't get into surfing. But for me, I kind of was adopted instantly into the brotherhood or whatever to call it, as far as like the surf shop, the Frog House. Those guys kind of took me in, and I mean, they abused the shit out of you. But
well, it is. I'm going to pause you just quickly because it is an institution in of itself, and I think people would benefit from an explainer of what is the Frog House, who is TK, what does it mean to the community.
I think the Frog House has got to be one of the most iconic surf shops. It's a hole in the wall. It's a really small shop. It's all smoke, no mirrors. It's the real deal. Like, you don't want to bring your sister, wife, aunt, anyone in there. It's just not a safe bet doing that. And I think it's probably toned down quite a bit now. But back in the day, if you're a Grom, you're just getting tortured. And it's also too, like a side fact is it was Volcom's first ever account. So like the Frog House has a lot of history, and it's a core surf shop. Like TK does it because he loves it.
Yep.
And he's an avid surfer still to this day. On some of the worst days out there, you'll see him out there. And he collects surfboards, and it's not, I want to say like a Jax, because I don't want to go bag on it on anyone or whatnot, but like TK is the real deal. Sure. And you can either get a sense of humor or you don't, but either way, like you can't take away the fact that this guy is, a true in and out surfer. And the shop has a lot of history. Like I think the thing is around since like the 50s or 60s. It's crazy.
And how did you get your start there? Because you moved really quickly. I think you said you worked the parking lot.
Yeah, exactly. So the parking lot's the bottom job. That's the gutter right there. Basically, because the shop's right by the beach, people will park on the weekends in the parking lot. So what they'll do is they'll stick a Grom in the parking lot with a beach chair. And all you do is just sit there all day to make sure no one parks in the parking lot to go surf or go to the beach. And that was my first job, and I was over the moon on it. It was just, like I think when kids are like going through a tough time with their family and stuff like that, like you hear a lot of kids, they fall back or they go to like something like a gang.
Right. Yeah.
And for me, that's exactly what the Frog House was.
They're looking for like family.
I felt like I belonged.
Yeah.
And I felt like I was a part of something. And then at the same time, I always thought surfing was super cool. But to be like working at the Frog House and this and that, like I was over the moon.
Because we're both shop kids,
Yeah.
Like and the thing about like when you said I was working the parking lot, it's the worst job, but I was stoked. Like I remember getting a job at Rip Curl Surf Center in San Clemente in '98, and they're like, you're in shipping and receiving, which was essentially like checking in boxes, opening the boxes, checking the invoice to make sure the inventory was there, marking it and putting it on the floor. I was so stoked. Like I moved so many boxes and was just so pumped, because it's the same thing of like everyone's looking for like family and connection, and you tap into this like really this kind of like temple of coreness in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And you're like, I can't believe they let me in.
Yeah.
Like this is amazing.
Yeah. And like with everything that was going on with my family, like I was able to go there every day after school or on the weekends. So, I'd go to school all week, and then on the weekends I'd spend it in the parking lot, and I couldn't have been more stoked. And I was meeting guys that were coming in, and, oh, that's the Grom that's working at the parking lot. And that's what led to the whole thing with Volcom is like, Richard Wolcott lived 2 houses away. And, from there, it was like they were starting Volcom, and, I ended up being lucky enough to be like one of those flow Groms,
right?
Yeah. And then the whole Volcom thing, like just to experience that, was
at the time
once in a lifetime. Like,
what was it like? I want to know what it was like. You became a Volcom surfer because you worked at the Frog House, but like, what does that conversation look like? Did you talk to Wooly? Did you guys go surf together? Like, how did that go?
No, and like, and for the record too, I could barely stand up. We're talking like my first year of learning how to surf. I wouldn't even call it sponsored, whatever, because it wasn't based off my surfing. It was that I was at the Frog House as a shop Grom.
Yeah.
And I think those guys had a blueprint, and their blueprint was they wanted to plant the seed right there in Newport and let it grow from there. I mean, Newport has been kind of, at the forefront or the HQ, so to speak, for a lot of brands. I mean, even with like,
Echo Beach,
whether
Quicksilver,
it's whether it was when Bob Hurley was doing Billabong, all the way up to like Pat Tenori and Ruka.
Why do you think that is?
I have no clue. I mean, there's so many beach towns. For me, I guess it's just luck of the draw. Like that's the one benefit I'd say, the pro and con, but the one benefit too of, being from Newport. You definitely have a leg up on like linking up with the brand.
It's funny because we talked about this a little bit with Sage, and we just talked about the proximity effect of like, hey, if you grew up in Orange County and wanted to get sponsored, like you didn't have to be that good compared to someone who grew up like 2 hours away.
Or like, let's talk about Australia. Yeah. I mean, there's dudes that surf so good, and there's no sponsor. They're not even trying to be a pro surfer.
Yeah.
But in Newport, I mean, it was a different story, especially when we were growing up. Like, I feel like that was kind of leading up to those few years through the early 90s to the 2000s. Like, I feel like that was there was so much marketing budget, so to speak. Like, there was charity jobs. There was, I mean,
The waves are consistent enough. It's a nice place to live. Like I mean, we're not going to figure it out on the podcast, but like I wonder why, because as you said, there's other beach towns, there's other places that are closer to like advantageous commercial conditions, whether it's shipping or investment money or whatever. For some reason, Newport, as you said, it's PM, Bob, Quicksilver, Volcom. It's crazy.
Yeah, the Quawks. I mean, you name it. It's for me, I look at it like this. If you want to be into movie making, you better move to Hollywood. Or, you better LA.
Yeah.
And as far as like brands go, I feel like if you did want to start a brand, I think the odds would be in your favor if you did do it in Costa Mesa, Newport.
Right.
Just because obviously it's been a proving ground for success.
Yeah.
In that realm.
How do you think working in the shop shaped your view like on surfing or just whatever kind of career trajectory you could have had?
I think it was on so many levels. Like obviously when you're the grom of the shop, you're getting humbled off the bat. So you're getting taught about respect and whatnot. And I think you're seeing so many characters and so many like such a variation of surfers come in from like, let's say someone that's going to get their first wetsuit or board to like when some pros would come in to do a signing. Like I remember when like Todd Chesser and Pat O'Connell, these guys came in from Rusty and it was a huge deal.
Yeah.
Like, you're just waiting for them to walk in the door and like for the signing to start. And so I just think you're able to see like such a wide spectrum of people that are into the same thing.
And people that are elevated. I mean, because the Rip Curl shop is closest to Trestles, we used to get all the CT board quivers dropped off for that event every year. And like, even like people, we didn't carry their boards. Like Chili would be like, I dropped off 14 boards for Bruce or like, and it was the easiest place to pick up like leashes and wax and to get your quiver delivered. So we'd get them coming in all the time. And even unannounced, it was like, oh my God, like you would not believe it. Like Andy came in today. He's way taller than everyone else, kind of thing. Like it was stuff like that. And I'm like, I'm curious to know what your approach was what was the mentality of like late teens, mid to late teens Logan. The general sense that Rip Curl was like, well, I work here, I get free wax, I get to surf every day. The video parts and QS results will come easy for me. And then bang, I'll be on tour and I'll come back and get free wax. You were a great surfer today. Was like a professional touring career ever like on the dream wall for you?
Never, because let's say I'm 14. By 15, I had met the Hobgoods and the Irons brothers and like the McCullough Joneses and Dustin Barkas and these guys. And
so what's your point?
Yeah, it was just like, and back then you don't realize like, okay, I'm, out in the water. I'm with like what Andy is basically like a LeBron or a Kobe, as far as one of the best ever.
Yeah.
And you don't realize at that point when you're 15, or maybe I would have like, wanted to at least more tribe. Like it wasn't even a thought. I knew when I was surfing with those guys and hanging out with them, I knew at that point, like I better find another niche because pro surfing is definitely not in the works for me. And it was a blessing too, because I knew early on, I knew that I was never going to be a pro surfer. I didn't want to ever be in the heat with Andy. Like it's nothing I wanted. And it actually put me in a really good place because you got all these guys and a lot of them would stay at my house and they come to town.
Yeah.
And they're all competing against each other. So this is kind of too maybe where the movie thing came in is like, I was allies, friends with everyone. I was never a threat to any of these guys,
Yeah, you become kind of like a Switzerland in a sense where you're like, hey, look, like I'm just here to break bread with everyone. Like you guys are the thing. The rub on getting to surf with those guys, in addition to having an enhanced perspective on what your career potential is in surfing, I found that like surfing with better surfers does make you sharper.
100%. And even filming with guys too, I noticed. Like after you film, like I was talking with Joe Alani the other day about it. And it's like, and Joe surfs really good.
Joe's a great surfer.
Yeah, great style and everything. And it's just like, when Joe's like going on the road with Wardo all those years or whatnot, or, I'm filming with whoever, let's just say Mick or these guys, like, dude, I always felt like I surfed a tad better after watching those guys,
right?
And it's just the same thing. Like, let's say basketball. If you're on the court with like a LeBron or a Jordan or Kobe, of course you're gonna leave. You're gonna leave. Like, it has to be a benefit. It's like you watch something, you digest it, and you just instantly in your head, the level of good surfing is at a very top tier.
I've talked about this a few times, but like I surf for the high school team, the college team, and like did like VQS stuff. Like they kind of got through heats here and now. Like, and same, like I'm like, I got this whole delusion about it's gonna work, which quickly got curbed. I remember distinctly going to my first trip for the ASP to Hawaii. Actually, wasn't my first trip, but I went to Florida, but it was my first trip kind of to Hawaii. And I remember going out like to Beach Park or Leftovers or somewhere, and there were other guys out there. And I remember coming in and thinking like, I don't even do the same thing. Like I'm not surfing. Like I just like, this is an entirely different thing. I need to like go back and redo all my fundamentals. But it's the same thing of like, and it was good because it's like, oh wow, like I actually focusing in on it and seeing it in person, it helps your own kind of deal.
For sure. And this is a fun one. I did one NSA. All right. In my first heat, I had Bobby Martinez and Peter Labrador, James Labrador's nephew.
Yep.
And they all rode for Billabong. I sat out the back and watched the whole heat. I didn't even bother to catch a wave. And that was it, you know? But it didn't mean that I didn't want to become a better surfer. It's just, I knew at that point competitive surfing and being a pro surfer was not going to be my thing.
So how did you flesh out the career pathway for yourself? Like, so we're late teens, you got all these amazing, really culture shifting identities coming and staying with you. Like, are you thinking management? Are you thinking I'll work in the industry? Are you thinking filming? How did that kind of go?
Yeah, I think, I mean, at basically 15, like TK had given me a team manager position at the Frog House where I was basically swooping up all the kids from the other surf shops and putting them on a team. And then like the kids wouldn't want to tell the surf shop they didn't want to ride for them. So I'd call up and act like I was them. And it's pretty funny because they're probably on the guys on the phone probably going like, oh, this doesn't sound like my buddy Andreas. Like, this doesn't sound like Andreas. Who's calling right now? But we swooped up everyone, had them on the Frog House. So early on, I kind of was thinking like team manager would be a good niche for me. And at the same time, Volcom started having me do airport runs. Once I got my driver's license, then they figured, oh yeah, we're going to tap into his driver's license. Because at that point, they were housing all their kids, all their team riders at my house. That's kind of how a lot of it started, was Volcom was having their Grom stay at my house. Because those guys were partying pretty hard back then.
Right.
So it wasn't like they were going to tell, Daniel Irons, like, yeah, Bruce is going to stay with us. It was better for them to say, hey, they're going to stay with Logan. He's their age.
Yeah.
There's parental guidance, which there was not parental guidance, but it was a
and
way
is this
better
in the trailer park
this
house?
No. At this point, after my family's divorce and stuff, things has started to get better.
Leveled out.
Yeah. And we had a house that was like one off of the beach. It wasn't on the beach, but it was one off. And I had 4 sisters, which meant there was 4 times the girls as far as all their girlfriends. And my dad was a single parent, so there was no parental guidance and just a load of girls in a house, just a house away from the beach.
And a bunch of Boy Scouts from Volcom that would come in and say,
yeah. And then after that, when for instance, if Bruce came, that meant Andy came, because at that point, that's just how it worked back then. And then to like McCullough Jones, and it just started like, hey, we can stay at this house in Newport. There's no parental guidance and a load of chicks. Like, so there was no like space on the floor for people to stay. It was that packed during nationals or anything. And from there, that was kind of how it all started, as far as like, that's how I got to meet a lot of these guys. I started coming staying at my house. And I think, it was a pretty organic thing too. It wasn't like, oh, I'm gonna have these guys in my movie one day when I'm older.
Right. Yeah.
It wasn't like that. But Volcom definitely kind of was creating a path for me. I think at that time, like Troy Eckert, was a big influence for me in that age bracket that we're talking about, that 15, 16. I remember one time they were going up to Santa Cruz for the Coldwater Classic, and they needed someone to drive more of the team riders up. And they're like, Logan, hey, can you help drive up? Like, we'll cover your gas money and you can stay, with the Smith brothers, Russ and Tyler Smith, and it'll be sick. And I was like, yeah, well, I don't know my dad and stuff. They're like, oh, we'll tell your dad you're doing the contest. So like, there's a lot of like rigging going on, where my dad's like, oh, this is so cool. Logan's competing in a pro event up in Santa Cruz. But believe me, I was not competing. I was just a chauffeur to get these guys up there. But it was such a rad experience.
It's like, we got with the World Surf League, and we were acquired a few years ago. We went from basically like 5 employees to like a couple hundred now. And I'm the longest surviving lab rat at the company right now, at least at HQ. And people are always, oh, what was it like? I'm like, it's pretty Wild West. which is good and bad because you get those experiences where it's like, yeah, I was super uncomfortable and like, but I learned a lot and I got to tap into something that felt special and not curated, but it's a kind of a double-edged sword.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, dude, I remember when we met. That's how I met you. And you were working at the ASP, and you're right next to Surfline.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And at that time, I'd gotten a job with SMP, and I remember you guys didn't even take credit cards yet. You had to come in with check or cash to enter your athletes into the event.
I remember. That's how we met everyone. I was like, oh, it's And
there was a girl named Rachel that worked.
Yeah, Rachel was there. Meg Bernardo, who's still with the company. She's been there since the beginning, essentially.
And this is 2000,
This,
right? 2001?
06.
06,
yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, so you were with SMP when I met you.
Yeah.
And that's maybe how you met Asher?
Yep, exactly. Yeah. That's how I met Asher. And that's a whole other story. After high school, I said I was going to Santa Barbara City College. I went up there. I didn't go to college. I surfed all winter and can't come, I think, March. I drove, did the drive of shame home, sat down and told my dad, like, hey, I've been lying to you. I never went to college this semester. I went to these point breaks up there to learn how to surf, to actually surf point breaks, And
How did Dad respond?
I think he thought I was going to tell him something way worse, So like when I said, I'm like, hey, I got something to tell you. I thought he was thinking probably something way worse. And my dad's pretty cool. Like he's pretty good, dude. He's not like white collar as far as like you're going to go to college, you're going to get your degree, then you're going to do this. Like, I think he wants you to grow within your own experience.
Right.
And about a week later, I got the opportunity to be the team manager at SMP, and within a few days, I was off to Australia. So,
what year is this?
This is 99.
99.
Yeah.
And with SMP, did they have a headquarters or a regional headquarters in Newport? Or
yeah, they had one in Costa Mesa.
Yep. Okay.
But and even though the brand had started in, let's say, San Diego, they were bought by an Australian, and they were doing really well in Australia. And the Australia team was huge. And at that point, they came to America and wanted to revamp America. And they had like Troy Tecklenburg and a few guys. And
what did it stand for? This is one of those urban myths that everyone in like high school was like, it means this. And I'm like, that's it. I've got no idea.
I think that was the beauty of it. You could like, you're supposed to say, like they would tell you, if anyone asks what SMP stands for, it means it stands for whatever you want.
Right.
But a lot of the, smoke more pot was one of them. Sex, money, power was
that's what I heard
one.
in high school. I'm like, it makes sense.
So, but yeah, I was lucky that I went home and I was honest with my dad and told him and said I could have hung out in Santa Barbara for at least a few more months, a few more swells. But at that point, it was just weighing on me, on my conscience to come home and come clean. And I had a sick time up there. I was stoked. I got a couple months of surfing Rincon and all those other waves up there. But yeah, before I knew it, I was on my way to Australia.
That was a good winter time, right? It was El Nino.
Yeah, it was El Nino. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of people that were in City College weren't going to class either at that point.
No, I mean, I don't know if they were lying like I was, but yeah, I mean, luckily it worked out. And then when I got the job, my dad was stoked because usually you go to college to get a job.
It's it's equal parts like education and experience and luck and timing. You know, like that's kind of my. People are like, oh, how did you get that job? I'm like, I liked it and was willing to work for free, and it was the right time.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things where like it's like family members or friends or neighbors are like, how does my kid get a job? Not here, but like anywhere.
Yeah.
And it's like it's just really that like it's that weird tension point of like I just got my degree, I need an entry level job, and the entry level job's like, how much experience do you have? Like none. So you have to kind of do the 3-dimensional math of like, how do I get experience and education, and how do I kind of synthesize those into a career?
Yeah, there's a lot of variables. I mean, I think you nailed it as far as like it's right place at the right time with the right circumstances, and lucky enough for me, that's what it was. And
so, team manager for SMP, you're traveling the world. What are the responsibilities at this point? Like
babysitting,
right?
It's babysitting, especially with the crew that we had. It was, Troy Tecklenburg is a wild card, and amazing surfer. He was in the same sentence with Wardo and Andy and those guys growing up. I mean, he took a national title or a U.S. title off of Andy and Wardo. They got a double interference. And Troy Tecklenburg walked away with the U.S. title.
Snuck through the wreckage.
And I think Andy and Wardo almost fought. Like I was kind of their initial like meeting each other, and they've been good friends ever since then.
Right.
But Troy was definitely one of the wilder characters. Like anyone can attest this. And so traveling with him and Rory Parker and these guys was crazy. Like, it was definitely Bad News Bears-esque. Like, there was a good chance that, you know, they do well, or there's an even better chance that they would not show up at all.
Right.
And I'd just be there to try to get them from A to B, and then, you know, collect photos, because even video then wasn't really a big thing. It was about, because print media, you know, print media was everything. So, you know, now we have surf edits online and stuff, but back then it was all about cover shots and spreads and whatnot. So.
And less, in my perspective, advertorial, you know, where it was like, if you got the shot, kind of doesn't matter who you are or who you rode for. You know, when I came up, it was sort of I don't know about the beginning, but it was certainly hitting stride with advertorial, where it was like, oh no, like there's very little like merit-based reporting going on really anywhere.
Yeah.
Like within surfing. I remember I remember doing like I'd started at the ASP. I was going off to Australia. I was still writing for Surfing Magazine. And Evan Slater was like, oh, hey, do you want to go to the ASR trade show and do the board short review for like a couple $100? I'm like, yeah, I need a couple $100. Like, I need that money. And I'm like, great. And I went to the trade show and I was like very diligent. I'm like, I got to talk to these 15 people. I like went to each of the booths and I'm like, what is your board short that's coming out? Tell me about it. You know, and this is 2006, 7. And they're all just like, I'm writing all the notes down. I write up this big report and I kind of graded them, like made it all up myself and sent it in. I'm like, I did a nice job there. I should get my couple $100. And then I remember getting like a screaming phone call, like from an unknown number on my flip phone from the sales department at Surfing, like berating the shit out of me for fucking up the board short issue. And I'm like, what are you talking about? They're like, we've already shot all the board shorts you're supposed to write up. They've given you all the points. You're just supposed to write it up. And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, what do you mean? I was objectively assessing these board shorts. And it was an extreme version of a wake-up call. But like you said, it's one of those things where, you know, an SMP writer who maybe might ride for one of the majors could easily get a cover shot.
Yeah. I mean, or, you know, win an air show or, you know, any of that stuff. And yeah, it was just it's different time then. Than now. But yeah, it was mainly babysitting, but it was so cool for me to be getting paid to travel with these pros. I was like, yeah, I figured it out. This is it. Like, I'm not a pro surfer, but I'm on their regiment. This is amazing.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of parallels, right? Because we're both from Orange County and quickly decided that we weren't going to be professional surfers. But for me, it was like, I mean, I've kind of had to think about this a lot through conversation. It's like, I ran away to join the circus. Like, this was exciting.
Yeah.
This was not like the homogenized, and I'm being hard on Orange County, but you know what I mean? Like,
of course. It's okay to be hard on Orange County. They'll be all right.
If any county can take it, I'm sure it's Orange County. But you know what I mean? It's like I have a limited exposure to things here. And then there's this circus comes to town and I can like jump in the tent and I can go everywhere and experience all these things. And that, I think, even if I didn't realize it at the time, was a big driving force.
Yeah, well, you know, the endless summer, there's the endless circus, you know, like the US Open's cool when it comes to town, but you know, why not make it last a little longer?
So when I met you, I think you were at Ruka at that point.
Okay, that's where it was.
That was like
Ruka
0506,
yeah,
right?
Exactly. So as Ruka writers, I was trying to sign up at the ASP at the point.
I think that's right, yeah.
You didn't even take credit cards then.
I don't even think we had computers.
Computers.
But I mean, because that was fairly infancy stage for Ruka at that point, right?
Yeah, I mean, you know, at that point, and that's the story. So after Snap 1 and 2, after I did 2.
That's right. Okay.
After I did Snap 2, it was 4th of July. I won't forget this. And Pat Tenori and Conan Hayes showed up to my house on 4th of July, and everyone's raging. And they don't rage, or they don't party. Yeah. You know, those guys are handling business. They're just launching their new brand, Ruka. And I was thinking, these guys got to be here for a reason. They either want to sponsor someone here or they want to talk to someone, because there's just no way they're coming down to this, you know, basically just a vortex of chaos. 4th of July in Newport's nuts. And it's craziest day of the year. And when they came up to the house, and there's people coming in and out, and a lot of the boys are there, and you know, they came out in the balcony, and I was thinking, these guys definitely have an objective for being here. This is not where they want to spend their 4th of July. And they're like, hey, look, we're starting this brand Ruka, and, you know, we want you to be a part of it. We want you to basically start helping us build the surf team and overseeing it. And at that point, I was like, and with Snap 1 and 2, by the way, like that was during like Taylor Steele will always be a god, right? But then there's also guys like Matty Jai who are doing like, Sabotage, Montage, 3 Degrees.
3 Degrees, yeah.
I mean, competition and surf movies at that point were like huge. It's like almost like Instagram's huge right now. Yeah. Surf movies back then were huge. So
it was a real high watermark in terms of like, this is the most one of, if not the most potent marketing mechanism for all these guys. Surfing is hitting its stride. Like the money's pouring into investing in film.
Yeah. And then too, you got Jack McCoy's. I mean, the list was endless. So Snap 1 and 2 really at the day, I don't think it was like a fly on the wall. It was some people were stoked on it, but there was just so much going on.
It was a fly on the wall, but like the other names that you bring up, like Taylor Steele, Jack McCoy, even Bill Ballard, well, not even Bill Ballard, of course, Bill Ballard.
Josh Palmer,
Josh Palmer, yeah, of course. Like they were all more established. I was working at the shop when Snap 1 came out, and I remember we got the screener, whatever, the marketing, the DVD, and we're like, holy shit, because it was the next thing, in terms of like you have these established guys, then you've got this new thing. All of them are formulaic in the sense of like, here's your guy, he's entering the water, here's his surfing, here's his outro. That's the music.
Yeah.
The music was fresh. You had what we talked about in terms of a mix of underground guys and like amazing segments with guys like Mick and Andy and Bruce. Like it was from my perspective, and I could have been wrong because I was like, 19, 20 working at the shop. It was a big deal at the shop.
It was a big fly on the wall.
A big fly. It's a cockroach on the wall. It's a big one. Yeah.
No, I mean, I think it was all timing too. Like, and that was the thing. Like 9/11 happened when I was working at SMP.
Right.
And that's when shit kind of hit the fan for the first time, I think, in the surf industry, at least with like the smaller brands that weren't pulling it.
Right.
And SMP was definitely affected by that immediately.
Right.
And at that point, I knew it was over, and I wanted to figure out what my next move was. And I was sitting there going, okay, just met Asher Pacey. Obviously friends with the Irons Brothers and the Hobgoods and, McCullough Jones and Dustin Barkas and all these guys. And I thought, I was actually watching Aaron Cormican surf.
Yeah.
I was on the beach watching him surf. I seen him do like 3 nuts combos, airs, whatever, three really well-ridden waves. Let's put it that way. And I was like, ding, I need to make a movie with my friends.
Yeah.
Because at that point I felt like these guys were the next momentum generation.
Yeah.
As far as like these guys, at least, Mick, Andy, Taj, all these guys, they were going to take over the game.
Yeah.
That's before I knew Kelly Slater was superhuman and just going to be dominating for decades and decades to come. But in general, this batch of guys, this generation was on the forefront of basically dominating. And
Kelly is, he's the ultimate anomaly. Like surfing is a community obsessed with the cult of youth. So they always want that next group coming through, and Kersey, he was another one that I think that's the first time I saw him surf was in the film.
And I met Kersey in Australia on that crazy swell. It was like basically the birth of the Superbank. 2001. 2001. Yeah. I went to Australia in August, which if you know Australia in August, that's the off season.
Yeah.
And I just went to hang with Asher, cruise with Asher, maybe filmed, some beach break stuff and whatnot. We decided to drive because we didn't even see the swell.
Yeah.
It was just, and we had heard that the sand was groomed. I think Damon Harvey had caught in a wave from the top of Snapper all the way to Cura. Now it was stormy.
It was. I've seen the wave.
Yeah,
and it was like a big moment in surfing because they're like it was like 2 kilometers long or something.
Guinness Book stuff, longest wave ever ridden. And so the bank was there.
Yeah,
it just the conditions that day weren't on. And then when I drove up, we got there in the evening. I saw it was like, well, this is so sick. It was like waist to chest high and just funneling it looked like what you dream of, and woke up the next morning and Asher and them went to go check it. This is at like 5 a.m. It's been howling wind all night and you're thinking it's going to be on shore, and I'll never forget it. He comes back to the room. He says, don't even bother or don't even worry about it. It's the best I've ever seen it in my whole life.
Yeah.
And at that point, there's still some rain. I grabbed an umbrella. I grabbed my camera, loaded up. And sure enough, one by one, here goes Mick. There goes Zoll. There goes Dean Morrison. And then I noticed too, this other kid ripping super hard. It was Josh Kerr, who was good friends with Asher.
Yeah.
So, and at that point too, no one was really expecting this swell to do what it did.
So it wasn't packed.
And so it wasn't packed, first of all. And then second of all, like mixed filmer Shaga, who I'm good friends with. You know Shaga?
Yeah, I know Shaga. Okay. He's amazing.
Shaga had a big one the night before and couldn't find his car in the morning. So I had like the first 6 hours of the swell all to myself. And then those guys all obviously wanted to see their rides, you know? So after...
You're straight in,
they're coming over to the little hotel room or whatever you want to call it, because it's pretty small little zone. And it was just nonstop 3 days. I got to meet... I'd met Mick, but I got to meet him more, like, you know, on a personal level. Sure. And Joel, and Dean Morrison, and Josh. And then at that point, Lowers was the next week.
Right.
So all these guys were flying back.
Yeah, September, right.
And actually, Parko was on my flight home. We watched footage the whole way home. He had like all the stewardesses and everyone bringing in beers. Like the guy was like a god, you know, on Qantas Airline.
Sure.
I was like, dude, I've never seen anyone get treated like this. You know, it was crazy. But I told Kersey.
Oh, I was just to say really quick on the Superbank thing, that first swell is really the stuff of legend. And it's stuff that people, they might know the story, but it's so hard to like articulate how nuts it would have felt. Like I went there when I was 17 before the Superbank and surfed Kira, and it's, you know, all the stories about Kira. It's like it is unparalleled in terms of being like an amazingly fun wave. But the fact that community would have woken up kind of so fresh after this weird like Army Corps of Engineers experiment and sand pumping happened, and they're like, oh my God, we've created like a 2 kilometer perfect wave. It would have been like the entire community hitting the lottery at the same time. Like,
and to be like a Seppo, to be an American randomly over there again, just making a movie. Yeah. I mean, I felt like the lottery. Like I knew no matter what else happened, like obviously I got that no can Dewey footage in Costa Rica that we talked about.
Sure,
right?
yeah.
But I knew this footage alone right here was going to at least make the movie worthy of watching.
Yep.
You know, and I couldn't even sleep. I actually thought people were going to come rob me for my footage at the time, because just felt like I had gold. Like this stuff was so good.
Yeah, as soon as Shaga found his car, he was coming over.
Oh, yeah. And then it was a 3-day thing. It was a 3-day clip bender. Like these guys, it was just nonstop. And
I want to circle back to Ruka, because you've got all these relationships, you've got so much credibility. Did Snapt 1 and 2 almost unquestionably factored into PM and Conan's decision to build you into the program?
Yeah, for sure. Without Snapt 1 and 2 was definitely a platform to kind of show that obviously I had the relationships with these guys. They were all on the verge of, you know, I'd say dominating surfing. And also too that as far as content, organizing trips, coordinating, all that stuff. Obviously, I was capable of doing it. And then I had the background of, you know, the early days at Volcom.
Yeah.
So without Snapt 1 and 2, I would have never got the position at Ruka.
Yeah. And I mean, it's grown into an amazingly impactful mechanism, really, inside and outside of surfing, you know, the Balance of Opposites campaign. I remember the early Artist Network program. What was it like being in there at the genesis with PM and Ruka? What was the mentality? How are you guys building that program at the time?
I mean, Pat's a different breed, like Kelly, like Pat's a different breed. And you pick up on that right off the bat. And for me, I feel like it was the most impactful experience I've ever had. As far as watching Pat do what he did then, like I'll always cherish that experience. And I feel like it'll always keep me inspired. Because at that point, too, that was right before the door closed. Because if you think about it, after Ruka, there's not really a brand that's come in and have done what they've done. Like at that point, Volcom was dominating the game. Like, you know, Volcom was definitely at the throne, and Pat came in and dethroned them. Like it was, and it wasn't all like rainbows and fairy tale. Like, you know, there's friction on the home court. Like there's a funny sticker story where basically it's like tagging, you know, where if there's a Volcom stone up, and someone to put a Ruka sticker over it. The next thing you know, phone calls are going down. And, you know, and the
power centers of the industry get Pat on the phone now.
You know,
they're screaming at each other.
And they get Pat on the
sign.
phone. And if you know Pat, he's not just a surfer.
You're right.
He's a black belt, and like he's tougher than any surfer in the game. You know, so if you call Pat and tell him, hey, you take your stickers, then you can use your imagination what Pat told them from there. You know, and that's why I gave Pat the nickname Shug. Because like he didn't mess around. He came on the block. He knew what he wanted. He had a vision, and did. And another thing about Pat is Pat will stay and work 20 hours. Dude, the guy gets 2 to 3 hours sleep, and the guy's, he's able to function, but he'll put in double the time. So you got to imagine if a guy's working this many hours a week and Pat's working 20, Pat's able to start doing circles. Like you wonder how Pat took the brand from the garage to selling it in 8 years.
Right.
That's pretty unheard of,
Yeah.
So my experience at RVCA, and then too, he diversified the game as far as, first Quicksilver was a surf company. Then Vulcan came in. They were a board company where they did snowboard, skate, and surf.
Yeah.
But Pat basically like took all that and said like, hey, we're going to do fight. We're going to do art. Yeah. We're going to do everything. It's going to be the balance of opposites, everything. So that meant like, with surfing, you got one avenue. But Pat opened up a whole freeway, and then that obviously translated into sales to where it was all systems go. It didn't matter what you did or where you came from, whatever. Like RVCA was appealing to the masses.
It's a pretty delicate dance though, right? Because the more you diversify, the higher the risk is of dilution of impact, So it is, it's easy to kind of talk about in the abstract of like, oh yeah, we'll just get literally everyone and put them on the program. But the amount of thought and harmonization that has to go on between fighters and musicians and longboarders and shapers and artists and, shortboarders, it's such a high level. Like you have this island of misfit toys in a sense. And so for a team manager, that must be incredibly challenging.
Yeah. I mean, well, and too, like this whole, like you hear it a lot now, lifestyle brand or lifestyle, right? But I think Pat like literally created that.
Well, he also lived it. Like that's a big,
and that's another thing. If you know Pat's story, Pat
lives it.
He lives it. Like RVCA is basically a reflection of his life between the fight, the surf, all that, the art, the graffiti, everything. It's a reflection of Pat's life. That's who he is. It's not a front. And so for me to diversify who I was working with, whether it was like picking up BJ Penn from the airport or getting him a walkthrough at RVCA or Mickey Avalon, it was like, I was all for it because I was finally for the first time ever, thanks to Pat, thinking outside of this box of surf. Yeah. And then obviously it's intriguing meeting all these characters, and that's another thing. Pat's just a genius at eyeing out talent before they're a big deal.
Right.
The MMA thing, like people were laughing at it back then, call it karate or whatever they want. But, Pat had the vision. He knew BJ and he was already really into jiu-jitsu. I think he was a black belt already at that point. Yeah. And he wanted to bring that element to his brand. Mm-hmm. And, look at the UFC and MMA now. It's huge. Yeah. But, Pat was at the forefront of it. He saw it and he ran with it. So.
How did you meet Mickey Avalon?
Through Pat. Of course, any character back then that you're going to meet, it was probably going to be through Pat.
Describe for someone that maybe has never heard of him who Mickey Avalon is.
He's a kid, grew up in LA, white kid, white Jewish kid. His parents were Auschwitz survivors, and his dad was a radical heroin addict that got hit and killed in front of an AA meeting. Had a pretty gnarly upbringing and ended up having his own heroin habit himself. And but also obviously is a talented guy. And him and Simon Rex, they started like basically in the living room together as friends, like, oh, we should rap or whatever, and then it kind of, it turned into something. And that's when Pat had met him. Like someone probably said, oh, you got to hear about this new white rapper guy up in LA. And Pat's like, bring him down, I'm sure. And then from there, it was like right before MySpace started. Yeah. And Mickey Avalon was MySpace's first artist.
What does that mean?
So they were promoting Mickey Avalon on MySpace.
He was the first guy.
He's the first guy. So like, instantly right there. Because you remember MySpace was like the original Instagram or Facebook, So if you gotta imagine if someone was the first Instagram person that Instagram themselves were blowing up, like that alone was, bringing value to him as an entity, as an entertainer. And, slowly he came up with that song, Jane Fonda. Yeah. And then K-Rock picks it up. And like, this guy started picking up steam really fast, and Pat had met him, really early on when they were handing out CDs out of, the trunk of their car. Yeah. I think Mickey's a good guy. He's really smart. He's really good at art. He's definitely like a different character. Like you bring him down to Orange County and stuff, and he's definitely, I wouldn't say a sore thumb. He's sticking out.
Yeah.
From the way he dressed to the way he talked to his whole deal. And I think a lot of people questioned it, but I think because, at least in Orange County and stuff, but when Pat was backing it, then I think people started like kind of
Gave him a bridge.
seeing it like, whoa, okay, if Pat's thinking this guy's got something here, then he does. And then the MySpace started happening, and then the Jane Fonda song came big, and from there it was like, the guy started doing really well.
Because at some point, and correct me if I'm wrong, you transitioned into managing Mickey. Is that right?
Yeah. So after a couple of years at Ruka, I came up with this concept that because at this point it's a really long story or whatever. Basically,
Sorry, it's
Mickey,
a podcast. We can talk as long as we want.
Mickey had a heroin problem,
Yeah.
and Pat wanted to help him. So Pat said, "Hey Logan, can you bring him with you on the road?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm going to Colorado for Christmas." And he's like, "No, that's cool. Bring him with you." I'm like, "To my family's?" And he's like, "Yeah, bring him with you. Like, it's for a good cause, you know?"
Yeah.
So at first I detoxed Mickey at my house, which was gnarly. Like, you watch Train Spotting or any of that, you know, it's like, I didn't even realize what I was signing up for. But leave it to Pat to talk me into it.
Cooperative or?
Yeah, he was cooperative.
But you're also not trained to do that, right?
No, not at all. I had no clue like I said, leave it to Pat to sign you up for something like that. But it came from like the better of his heart. He wanted to help Mickey.
Yeah.
So we got him clean at my house. He detoxed. And at that point, I'm like, all right, Pat, he's detoxed. And that's when I'm like, hey, I'm going to Colorado with my family for Christmas. He's like, you got to bring him with you.
Mm-hmm.
So I brought him with me. He was doing really good. And then I'm like, if there's a QS in Florida, remember at Sebastian?
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm like, hey, we're going to Florida. He's like, you're bringing him with you to Florida. I was like, what? We're sending him to Florida. So we brought him to Florida for the QS. And he started meeting all the surfers.
He probably fitted in better in like Sebastian Inlet than Orange County.
Probably. But at that point too, this is too already. At that point, like Jane Fonda had come out. Like people had already started hearing about him. And I remember like I introduced him to Mason in the parking lot. Mason must have been like 15 or something.
Yeah,
at
he
this
would have
point.
been so young.
Yeah, he's a Grom. But they were stoked. People were stoked on him. It was like bringing someone different into the surf thing and whatnot. For some reason, like it was a good fit. Like then after Florida, it was Hawaii. We brought him to the Pipe QS event. So next thing you know, like Mickey's on tour. He's on tour, and he was doing good. He's clean and everything was good. And his songs are blowing up. And at that point, we'd organically kind of been marketing Mickey in the surf game. So basically fast forward to the next winter, we're talking with Pat, we're figuring it out. I'm like, dude, why don't we have a Mickey Avalon concert during the Pipe Masters, or during the Triple Crown? And Pat was super into it and whatnot. And that's kind of like, I think where the whole Ruka Aloha thing came from, as far as like, not only did Mickey come, but Pat got all the artists to come. He got the fighters, he got everything. It was a full blown circus.
Yeah. And
we did the event at the Hard Rock Cafe, and everyone came, BJ came, the fight thing. And Andy, Bruce, Borg, everyone came. I think actually Kelly brought his girl. That was their first date, from what I've heard, because it's in the David Cho book. That was his first date with her, was at the Hard Rock, the Mickey Avalon thing. I could be wrong, but
it's on the podcast now. It's gospel.
Yeah. Okay. So basically at that point, we're like, whoa, like we got something here as far as Mickey's a big draw in the surf game now, at least at that time, and some stuff had happened. There was a new like global marketing director came in, and
at Ruka.
Her and I butt heads, and she basically like wanted my Rolodex or something. And I was like, oh, this is a 20-year long thing. This isn't just my Rolodex. These are my friends.
Yeah.
We butted heads, and I basically parted ways with them.
Yeah.
On good terms.
Yeah.
And Mickey and I decided to start doing concerts during surf contests. So I was like, let's go to Australia during Snapper.
What year is this?
Same thing. At this point, this is like 6 or 7, 2007.
Yeah.
Okay.
I remember this.
And then we went and did 2 shows. We did one in the Cooley Hotel in Coolangatta during Snapper.
Yep.
And we did one in Sydney. And I think we did like $30 or $40 tickets. They're 1,000-person venues.
Yeah.
And so sold out of both of them.
Yeah.
And let's say they're $40 tickets. It's $40,000 a night.
Yeah. And
you did 2 of them. So next thing you know, you're sitting on $80,000 in 2 days.
Yeah.
And you give Mickey, let's say 10 to 15, and you're sitting with a pretty big chunk of money, $60,000 over a weekend.
Yeah.
In Australia. I was like, this is it. I'm stoked. I'm going to start doing this. So we did one at the US Open, and we started doing them, and it was was really good money. But at the same time, too, it started pulling me in a different direction as far as now I wasn't doing surf stuff.
Yeah. It's a different world.
Yeah. Like now I was in vampire world as far as like these events are at night. It had nothing to do with, getting guys up early in the morning to make their heats.
Well, and we've, it's one of those things too. We've talked about the Wild West kind of foundation, right? Because we were in the industry ahead of a lot of like maturing and hard lessons it had to go through, right? It's not the same it wasn't the same then as this in 2020. And so there were almost seeds of like, well, I don't mind having a drink, or I don't mind smoking pot or whatever. Do you think that transition into vampire world like kind of radicalized you in a way in terms of how you spent your time?
Oh yeah, without a doubt. I mean, you are who you surround yourself with, and that's nothing against Mickey. It was just I was now surrounded by a different environment. Let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously Mickey with his heroin habit at the time and everything going on, and not even just that. It's just like I said, those concerts at night that start at 10 and end at 2, those are vampire hours.
Yeah.
You're not even seeing the sun.
Yeah.
And that's so polar opposite of what I'd grown up doing. Everything that I did revolved around like being up early, being at the beach, the sun, the salt water, surfing.
Yeah.
So I didn't really realize it at the time. And for me, I was looking at like my bank account.
Yeah,
like,
it's a career opportunity.
And a lot of this was in cash. So it was even better.
Also problematic, like, right? If you're trying to access substances.
But then, obviously, and then at that time, it was like a perfect storm. Not only that time, you had the whole like OxyContin movement going on. And, that's when obviously things took a turn.
Were you using anything else before you got into that?
No, weed.
Yeah.
But I don't count that.
No, well, and I think the reason I bring it up, right, is because, a lot of people are like, well, there's gateways and it's a trajectory, but it's like, it's a big jump from alcohol, marijuana to opioids.
If it's opioids, I feel like, obviously, you got stuff like amphetamines, meth and stuff like that, or coke or that stuff. Like, obviously that's in the danger zone, right? But opiates are on another level. It's the most addictive chemical to the human body and brain. There's no other substance you need where you need to have it to get out of bed or you're deathly sick.
What were the circumstances where you tried it for the first time? Like, and you have to like name names or anything. I'm just more interested in like, were you tired? Were you in pain? Did you want to go numb? What was it?
At my wedding, my wife's uncle and I got in a fight. He was like on a tequila blackout. It just came down and threw a Hail Mary and got me good in the jaw. And then we got on the ground. We fought.
On your wedding night?
Night before the wedding.
Night before the wedding.
Yeah.
Okay.
I need him. And we got on the ground. And but the next day, my jaw was all messed up. I was messed up for a little bit. And I'm not going to like roll anyone under the bus or whatever because it's not their fault. But I asked like, I need something for my pain.
Yeah.
And in the back of my head, I kind of knew I was giving myself a hall pass to try, what you call OxyContin. I knew, at that point that this wasn't like your average drug. I knew it was something different.
What year is this?
I'm going to say 7 or 8.
So the only reason I ask is because, I read the Sam Quinones book about the opioid crisis, Dreamland. And a big part of that is really kind of big pharma and the media hiding like the radical addictive nature of it for capitalism. Well, really, and so people at that point, like you're like, I know it's a thing, but it's got like a prescription name and like doctors give it out. Like it's a different time to now in a big way.
Well, that's why they got sued for billions and billions of dollars. It's like they pitched it as a non-addictive pain option or pain alternative. Like it actually got pitched as a non-addictive pain medication, which is just outrageous that they would even, market it like that. Right. Because, you're talking about synthetic heroin. Straight up, like that's what it is.
Yeah.
So that's like basically saying like, here, have heroin, but you're not going to get addicted to it. It's like people know heroin's like a vampire. Like you get bit by it, dude. You might be a vampire for the rest of your life before you're dead from it.
So you start night before your wedding. How does that incorporate into your tour life in terms of accessibility and usage? And I know you've talked about it really candidly, which I think helps a lot of people because you said you were essentially a zombie for 4 years.
Yeah, for 5 years. And it was on and off. And it was like constantly, basically, it was just like 2 weeks after the wedding, right? Then you did 1. And then a month later, let's say you did 2. And then within 6 months, it's turning into more and more. It's like this kind of rapid but sneaky addiction for some people. Everyone's different.
Yeah.
One person can do one and the next day that's it.
Yeah.
They're on them for good. I would do this on and off thing for a while. And at the time I'm making good money working with Mickey. So I'm kind of looking at my bank account's good. And then I had my first daughter, and my wife's bipolar and deals with severe depression, and they took her off all her meds. So the pregnancy alone was just radical. So when things were really tough on the home front, I knew what could numb me, because it's a painkiller, right? And not only is it physical, it relieves the physical pain, but also mental.
Well, I was going to say, like, just I think a lot of people look at jobs in this space like, that's so fun, man. Like, look at you guys. Like, because frankly, a lot of it gets curated out on social media these days, but it is high stress, even earlier on, like babysitting talent, like it is high stress because you're dealing with like duty of care and deadlines and all these things. And especially when you add in, new parenting and just things that people have to go through in life all the time. Like, as you said, it's one of those things where it's like, well, it's, the bank account's fine. Like I need this to keep it going.
Yeah. The thing is, I think between dealing with Mickey on one front and that whole circus, and like Mickey will attest to this, I was working with him during the darkest times of his life.
Had he relapsed?
Oh yeah. He had relapsed before Hawaii.
Yeah, right.
That whole on tour thing only lasted so long.
Yeah,
but at the same time, his career, his music was blowing up. So that's all anyone saw. No one even cared anymore that he was using. They just were
and that's the self-propelling thing where you're like, no, I'm succeeding.
Exactly. And that's where it's like, it's the grand, what do you call it? It's like delusions of
grandeur.
Yeah. As far as like, oh, my bank account's good, I'm doing good. It's like, okay, your bank account might be that, but like you internally are broken or you're breaking. And that's why I always say it was a good metaphor with money. Like, it's like I said, like we lived in this nice house and whatever it was, we moved to some shit house and I was the happiest kid in the world.
Yeah.
So it almost came back kind of full circle as far as like right when I started making a lot of money through the Mickey thing, I didn't realize what was going on, but I had become addicted to Oxycontin and I was ruining my life. And I was setting myself up for a really dark, deep hole to crawl out of.
Yeah. And
then dealing with my wife and what was going on the home front with her bipolar disorder and a newborn. And newborns, the kids are gnarly. Like it's really stressful. So for me, like I thought I had it figured out. Like, oh, I'm just going to keep taking these pills, and they seemed to have got me this far. I didn't know. I had no clue, what path I was going down. And then
so much energy goes into like the pageantry too, as you said, like, it's like, well, when we lived in a trailer, like as happy as I ever was, the amount of energy and again, stress where it's like, no, I got like the rock star job and like the family and the house and the bank account. Like, it's in all the brochures, right? Where people are like, hey, that doesn't matter.
No. And two is just, it's like I said, it was all timing. Like, dude, the whole opiate thing, the Oxycontin thing, dude, it came through like a tsunami.
Yeah.
I could only list like a few friends of mine that didn't get, locked on it for a while. Like, Dustin Barker would probably be one of them. He was the few guys, he just didn't care what everyone else was doing. He stuck to his own deal and did his own thing. But I want to say not everybody, because that's a large claim, but dude, it swept through and grabbed a big portion of our generation of surfers and guys.
Well, and I think that had to do, like we talked about, with like big pharma's sweeping under the rug of the addictive qualities of it. Like that was the hyper normalization of it at the time. And I was going to say, while you weren't at RVCA, you're still intersecting with the surfing world. I remember vividly, like, again, urban legend about like Andy and Taj fighting over their trilogy songs because like Andy wanted the Mickey song.
Yeah. It was crazy. It was, like I said, like, I wasn't the rock star, but I sure think I was feeling like one at the time because I was, I was managing Mickey and overseeing him, and we were marketing him in the surf game, and all the surfers loved him. So I was feeling like I was on top of the world, but, I didn't really have a clue actually what the reality of where I was going with that. But it was working at the time as far as like Mickey was a big draw. Like every time, Bruce or Andy had a section coming out, they wanted it to be to Mickey Avalon,
Yeah. And you had a front row seat to what that looked like in the surfing world too.
Yeah. And obviously it felt good. I'm sure it felt good for me. I'm sure it felt good for Pat. Because even though I wasn't working at RVCA, all those events I had were presented by Ruka.
Yeah.
I still was basically like doing, I don't want to say independent contract with them, but they were affiliated with these events. We were still a team.
Yeah.
You know? So
you had 5 years on this cycle. What was the thing that broke it for you?
Well, I mean, 5 years, 3 rehab stints. And I honestly, it got to the point where I think at that point, my daughter was 4, almost 5. And I started thinking about my mom. And basically, I refused to put my kid through what me and my brothers and sisters went through.
Yeah.
And I was basically at a point where I'd rather not be in her life at all, because she was going to start remembering, me being dope sick, me being off to a rehab for a month, probably her mom crying, just like how toxic a household gets or a family gets from an addict, especially an opiate addict. Mm-hmm. So at that point, I kind of knew, I felt really guilty. Like, even she was going to start elementary school soon, in kindergarten. I was going to see all these parents that I went to school with. And at that point, I'd crawled in a hole. I didn't want to see anyone. I wasn't working. It was just a really dark place. And this was part of the time too, where I saw a thing that Kai Neville said about independent surf movies being dead. And in my head, I was thinking, I'm feeling pretty dead myself. Andy had passed. The glory days were over, and it felt like a lot of my buddies were all on this. People were dying. It was dark. And basically, I would try to get clean every few weeks, whether I was in rehab or not. I would constantly be trying. I knew that this wasn't the lifestyle I wanted, but I couldn't stop.
Yeah.
And it was 2015. And luckily I was able to detox again at home and basically jumped in the water. I started surfing again, and I started surfing more and more and more. And I realized kind of at that point, hey, I've got more time than I ever had at a rehab. Maybe I need to stop trying to do what everyone else is doing through the program and, AA or NA and stuff. And I'm not doubting the way that works. The facts are those, the odds are in your favor. But I was just thinking, for me personally, maybe I didn't need to start a new identity and reset. Maybe I need to tap back in to what made me that happy person that made me, love life. And that was surfing. So I basically just started surfing tons, no matter how shitty it was or whatever the deal is. I really tapped into it. And then I'm slowly seeing people, and they're like, "Oh, you look healthy, you look good." People were, obviously stoked. They were at my funeral,
right?
And were seeing me back in the water, And at that point, the more time I picked up, the more I was like, "Dude, this is what I want for me. This is the lifestyle." And I started thinking about too what Kai Neville had said, and I was thinking, bro, if there's ever a time to try to do Snap 3, this would be it, because I feel like making a movie right now would be a reflection of my recovery.
Well, and you hear this a lot. It sounds like you're channeling, and people do this all the time, the addictive tendencies you have into what works for you.
Exactly. And I knew, hey, if I'm chasing waves or chasing clips, even if the movie's a failure, as long as I'm clean at the end of this thing, as long as I'm not on opiates, dude, then this is a win. Because the odds of getting off opiates are so slim, especially on your own terms.
Yeah.
They're going to tell you, whatever you do, don't do it on your own.
Right.
But for me, that was kind of appealing, because I'd already failed trying it the other ways.
Sure.
So I thought I had nothing to lose.
Well, and you'd probably already absorbed the program a little bit, right? So it's not like it was for naught. You're I kind of understand the steps because I've been there a few times. And now, again, I'm channeling this into something that works for me. Have you found that since you've been clean, it's gotten easier as you've gone through, or is it's an everyday?
100%. It's gotten clean. Another thing too is my brother is became a drug alcohol counselor, right? And he's very pro AA. That's how he got clean.
Yeah. So
he was pushing on me hard, and I think it was having a reverse effect. So eventually, he said to me, if you don't do it this way, you'll never do it. And that's sometimes kind of, to be honest, what I need to hear.
Right.
Because then I'm I'm not even going to do this for myself. I'm going to do this to put it in my brother's face.
Right.
And make him believe that not everyone has to do it his way in order to do it.
Well, it sounds like that's similar to the film with the Kai Neville comments.
Exactly. So I think it was all tying together, where I was not only am I going to stay clean and do this, but I'm going to make a fucking surf movie.
Well, and I mean, I'll track it all the way back to the Jack comment, right? Where I do think that if you do decide to keep doing these, or even if you change it up, I think the Snapt legacy and what it's developed for good and ill at some points is such a powerful draw for the next generation, the next generation, the next generation. So you're going to have people like Jack Robinson, who's a naturally reserved person, being like, you got to keep doing this, man. Like, we need this platform because this is a brand, or not a brand's even like too weak a word. Like, this is a prestige that is established, and it must make you feel good.
Yeah, it does. I mean, like I said, I think the best part is tying the opiate recovery together with Snap 3.
Right.
That was like the ultimate. I'll never be able to repeat that. And I think that's why right now I'm kind of putting so much pressure on myself, because I feel like it's going to be hard to outdo Snap 3 just because it was so special. There was so much going on. There's so much positive going on to be coming back to life and at the same time resurrect Snap, which I thought was impossible at one point. And two, between us, like, there was a lot of people writing it off. Like, they were writing me off like, good luck. This kid's not even going to stay clean. Like, this kid's going to be, he's going to relapse. He's going to be back on opiates in no time. Or it's like, good luck. Like, you're making a surf movie. It's been 15 years. Yeah. To come back after 15 years and do anything is tough, But I knew, like, the odds were never in my favor. They weren't in my favor to get off of opiates. And if I could do that, I felt like I could make Snap 3. And basically, I was lucky I was able to tie the two together. And when people would say anything negative, it wouldn't be like I was like, oh, F that person he's put on me. I was like, I use that as inspiration and motivation, as far as, like, it's easy when people are cheering for you. But if you can channel the negative of the booing or people putting you down and channel that into motivation to actually prove them wrong and actually motivate you to put it back in their face and make this thing, what they said you couldn't. I think that also too, there's no better feeling. Yeah. So he was able to do it all at the same time together. And 2016, that was definitely, I'd say, the most special year of my life.
That sounds like it's a huge inflection point for you. And we started this podcast by highlighting all the different roles and frankly, lives like you've played in surfing, even at times like against some really stacked odds. What does the next chapter look like for Logan Dulien?
That's what it was Snap for. I was like, it'd be really disappointing if I had put all that work into resurrecting Snap 3 to just leave it at that, so I want to solidify Snapt as whatever, a brand or a legacy or whatever. And I want to solidify myself as a surf movie maker and someone that's been in the industry. And I feel like, I resurrected a lot of support and people believing in what I could do. And now I feel like I'm in a place where I want to capitalize on that. I want to work really hard to solidify Snapt. And, I want to try and outdo Snap 3. And I know it's not going to be easy. Nothing good is easy. If it was, then everyone would do it, But right now, like, my whole thing is I've got my blinders on. And I just want to put my head down. And let's say we just scored that trip that just went on. But to me, that was yesterday. And, like, we still have a lot of work to do. And for the next 7.5 months until we premiere this thing, like, I'm just all in. Because I know it's like a game. It's like once the clock hits 0 and it's over, that's it. You can never go back and put scores on the board. So I just want to go all out. And my wife hates it. Because, it's just...
it can be all-consuming.
It consumes me completely. Yeah. But I'm okay with it. This is what I signed up for. And
it's a good consumption.
Yeah, and I love it. And the benefit about me, like what I learned from Pat back in the day is like, dude, if I can do 20-hour days, then even though there's 7.5 months left to make the movie, if I put in the time, that could be a year for someone else if I want to stay up late and get up early. Yeah. So, and that's like another thing about social media, the internet. I'm constantly looking at where people post swells all the time or like, oh, look at this forecast coming. I see that. And I'm thinking who would be good to go there. And the next thing you know, I'm DMing them or bugging them. These guys are making their own sections, but they'll confirm with you. I'm working with them and I'm definitely trying to get them motivated and pumped to like, let's do this together.
You're one of the biggest gatekeepers in the game for sure. Before we go, we got the lightning round. So 10 questions, you answer them as fast as you can. If you could have one board set up for the rest of your life, single fin, twin fin, thruster, quad bonzer, or finless, what would you take?
Thruster.
Coffee or tea?
Tea.
Burrito or pizza?
Pizza.
Last book you read?
Good question.
Best surf film ever?
Momentum.
One wave you never have to go back to?
One wave I never have to go back to.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
You didn't have a positive experience. Don't want to go back to.
J-Bay.
Okay.
Sharks was outrageous. Seen that shit of Mick? You remember that trip?
I remember. If you only get to surf one wave for the rest of your life?
The Bayou.
Best person to share a lineup with?
I say maybe Mason.
Worst person to share a lineup with?
Shark.
Finish the sentence. I will next achieve a state of happiness by
making Snapt 4 the best surf movie that I've ever made.
Right on. Logan Dulien, thanks for coming on the lineup, man.
Dave, thank you for having me.
So that's it. That's our conversation with Logan Dulien. I hope you enjoyed it. Another thank you to Logan for sharing his experiences and being so candid and honest. For anyone struggling with any of the issues discussed on this podcast, please understand that you can reach out to someone for help. It's something we all need from time to time, myself included, and there's no shame in seeking it out. And if you haven't listened to our other pods, please download, listen, and subscribe if you like them. They're available wherever you get your podcasts. We'll be back next Tuesday. Hope you get some waves wherever you are, and we'll see you then.